The Galactic Academy of Unified Species stood like a jewel among the stars. Its massive halls stretched across an entire moon, filled with students from hundreds of different worlds. Here, young beings learned about science, diplomacy, art, and how to live together in peace. The Academy was proud of its mission. It believed that all species could learn from each other. On the first day of the new term, a transport ship landed at the main dock. Among the crowd of new students, one figure stood apart. He was tall by most standards, with brown skin and dark hair cut short. His name was Elias Chen, and he came from a world that made other species nervous just to hear its name. Earth, a Category 12 Deathworld. Most planets in the galaxy were gentle places. Life evolved slowly there in calm environments with stable weather, but Earth was different. Earth was a world of violence. Volcanoes erupted without warning. The ground itself would shake and split open. Massive waves could swallow entire cities. The weather changed from burning heat to freezing cold, and the creatures that lived there had evolved to match their world. Everything on Earth was dangerous. Everything on Earth was a survivor. Humans were the greatest survivors of all. Elias walked through the Academy's entrance hall with his bag over one shoulder. Other students moved away from him without knowing why. There was something about the way he moved that made them uncomfortable. He walked too quietly. His eyes moved too much, always watching, always tracking movement around him. When someone dropped a metal tray in the distance, most students jumped at the sound. Elias did not jump. He went completely still for one heartbeat, his body frozen in perfect readiness. Then he relaxed and continued walking. He found his assigned room in the living quarters. It was small but comfortable, with a bed that adjusted to different body types and a window that showed the stars outside. Elias put his bag down and sat on the bed. He looked at his hands for a long moment. They were steady now, but they had not always been steady. He had worked hard to make them steady. The next morning, classes began. Elias took his seat in the back of the lecture hall. He did not want to be noticed. He did not want to draw attention. He just wanted to learn and to prove that humans could be more than what their reputation suggested. The instructor was a Corvani named Velorin. She was old, even by the long-lived standards of her species. Her body was covered in silver scales, and she had 4 arms that she used to gesture while she spoke. Her eyes were large and golden, and they saw everything. She had been teaching at the academy for 300 years. She had seen many students come and go, but she had never taught a human before. Velorin noticed Elias immediately. She had read his file. She knew what Earth was like. She knew the statistics, the number of deadly animals, the frequency of natural disasters, the violence of the ecosystem. She knew that humans had survived all of it. They had not just survived. They had conquered their world and spread to the stars. And they had done it by being the most adaptable, most persistent, most dangerous creatures their planet had ever produced. But looking at Elias, she saw none of the aggression the reports warned about. He sat quietly, took careful notes, and asked thoughtful questions when called upon. He was polite to his classmates, even when they stared at him with fear in their eyes. He smiled easily and laughed at jokes. He seemed almost gentle. This confused Velorin. She decided to watch him more closely. As the weeks passed, she saw the effort behind his gentleness. She saw how he controlled his reactions, how he forced himself to move slowly around others, how he kept his voice soft even when frustrated. She saw the way he would pause before entering a room, his eyes scanning for exits and potential threats before he even realized he was doing it. She saw the way he positioned himself with his back to walls, never to doors. These were not the habits of a soft creature. These were the habits of a predator, trying very hard not to frighten its prey. One evening, after the other students had left, Velorin approached Elias as he gathered his materials. "May I ask you something personal?" she said. Elias looked up at her. There was wariness in his eyes, but also politeness. "Of course, instructor." "Why do you hide what you are?" The question hung in the air between them. Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, but it was a sad smile, full of old pain. "Because they are already afraid of me," he said. "I see it in their eyes. They have heard the stories about Earth, about humans. They think we are monsters. If I act the way my instincts tell me to act, if I move the way my body wants to move, they will be terrified. So I slow down, I soften my voice. I make myself small." He paused. "I do not want to be their nightmare instructor. I just want to be their classmate." Velorin felt something shift in her old heart. She had lived for centuries. She had seen cruelty and kindness in equal measure across the galaxy. But she had rarely seen this. A creature built for violence choosing peace, not because it was weak, but because it was strong enough to make that choice. "That must be exhausting," she said quietly. Elias nodded. "Every single day, but it is worth it. On Earth we have a saying, the strongest person in the room is the one who does not need to prove it." He picked up his bag and slung it over his shoulder. "I have nothing to prove, instructor. I know what I am. I know what I can do. That is exactly why I choose not to do it." He walked out of the lecture hall, leaving Velorin alone with her thoughts. She stood there for a long time, watching the empty doorway where the human had been. She had taught thousands of students. She had seen bravery and cowardice, strength and weakness. But she had never seen anyone carry such a heavy burden with such quiet grace. She made a note in her personal file: "Watch this one. Protect this one." The galaxy did not deserve him, but perhaps it could learn from him. If only it would give him the chance. The Academy had many students from many worlds. Most of them were peaceful species who had evolved on calm planets. They studied hard, made friends, and dreamed of futures in diplomacy or science. But not all students came to learn. The Thoraxians came to dominate. The Thoraxis Dominion was a military empire that controlled dozens of star systems. Their people were large and strong, with thick gray skin and 4 arms that ended in sharp claws. They stood nearly 8 feet tall and weighed 3 times what a human weighed. Their culture was built on conquest. For generations, they had expanded their territory by force. They had never lost a war. They had never met a species they could not crush. 5 young Thoraxians attended the academy that year. Their leader was named Krathver. He was the son of a famous general, raised on stories of Thoraxian glory. He had been sent to the academy not to learn, but to prove that his people were superior to every other species in the galaxy. When Krathver first saw Elias, he felt nothing but contempt. "That is the Deathworlder," he asked his followers. "That skinny creature." The other Thoraxians laughed. They had heard stories about Earth and its dangerous wildlife. They had expected something impressive. Instead, they saw a quiet young man who kept to himself and avoided conflict. "Deathworlders are overhyped," Krathver declared. "It is just propaganda, stories to make weak species feel important. Look at him. He flinches from loud noises. He avoids eye contact. He walks away from challenges. He bared his teeth in a predator's smile. He is soft. He is prey." What Krathver did not understand was that he was watching a loaded weapon with the safety on. Elias did not flinch from loud noises because he was afraid. He flinched because every sudden sound triggered ancient instincts that screamed danger. His body wanted to react. His muscles wanted to move. His brain wanted to assess the threat and eliminate it. Every flinch was Elias fighting against 1,000,000 years of evolution. Every flinch was a victory of will over instinct. He avoided eye contact because on Earth, direct eye contact was a challenge. It was a prelude to violence. Elias had learned that other species found eye contact friendly, but his body still read it as aggression. So he looked away, not out of submission, but out of self-control. He walked away from challenges because he knew what would happen if he did not. He had seen it before, felt it before. The red haze that descended when his survival instincts took over. The terrifying speed and strength that his body could produce when it thought his life was in danger. He had hurt people before, back on Earth. Before he learned to control himself, he never wanted to hurt anyone again. But Krathver saw none of this. He saw only weakness. The harassment began slowly, as it always does. A shoulder check in a crowded hallway. Crathver walked straight into Elias, knocking him against the wall. "Watch where you are going, pray," he growled. Elias said nothing. He steadied himself and walked away. A knock of materials from his desk during class. One of the Thoraxians passed by and swept Elias' tablet and notes onto the floor. "Oops," the Thoraxian said with a cruel smile. Elias picked up his things quietly and returned to his work. Whispered insults as he passed: primitive, weakling, coward. The words followed him through the hallways, spoken just loud enough for him to hear. Elias kept walking. He kept smiling. He kept his hands at his sides and his breathing steady. Inside, something was building, something dark and old and very, very patient. Other students noticed what was happening. They saw the Thoraxians targeting the human, but nobody spoke up. The Thoraxians were big and mean, and most students did not want to become targets themselves, so they looked away and pretended not to see. Instructor Velorin was not most students. She saw everything. She saw the pattern of abuse. She saw the way Elias tensed whenever Crathver was nearby, his body preparing for a fight that his mind refused to allow. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the strain of constant vigilance. She filed a report with the Academy administration. She described the harassment in detail. She recommended immediate intervention. She warned that the situation was dangerous, not because the human might be harmed, but because of what might happen if he was pushed too far. The administration received her report. They put it in a queue. They assigned it a priority level. They scheduled a meeting to discuss it. The bureaucracy moved slowly. It always did. Forms had to be filled out. Procedures had to be followed. Due process had to be observed. Meanwhile, the harassment continued. Crathver grew bolder. He had pushed the human for weeks, and the human had done nothing. This confirmed everything Crathver believed. Humans were weak. Deathworlders were a myth. The stories were lies. He began to plan something bigger, something that would prove his superiority once and for all. "We will corner him," Crathver told his followers. "Somewhere private where no one can see. We will teach him what real predators look like. We will break him." The other Thoraxians agreed eagerly. They were tired of playing games. They wanted to see the human cry. They wanted to see him beg. They did not know what they were planning to unleash. Across the academy, Elias sat alone in the library. He was reading a book of poetry from Earth, trying to calm the storm inside him. The words were beautiful. They spoke of peace and hope and the goodness that existed even in dark times. But the darkness inside him was growing harder to ignore. Every insult fed it. Every shove fed it. Every whispered threat fed it. It was like a beast in a cage, packing back and forth, waiting for the door to open. Elias closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He thought about why he had come to the academy. He thought about the future he wanted, a future where humans were seen as more than monsters. He could not let the beast out. He would not let the beast out. But the cage was getting weaker, and the Thoraxians were about to test its strength. The botanical gardens were the most peaceful place in the academy. Thousands of plants from hundreds of worlds grew there under a vast dome of transparent metal. The air was warm and humid, filled with strange scents and the soft sounds of artificial insects. Students came here to study, to meditate, or simply to escape the stress of their classes. Elias had found a quiet corner among the plants. He sat on a stone bench near a small pond, reading a collection of poems from Earth. The book was old and worn. His grandmother had given it to him before he left for the academy. She had told him to read it whenever he felt lost. He felt lost now. The weeks of harassment had worn him down. He was tired of being careful, tired of controlling himself, tired of being afraid of what he might become. The poems helped. They reminded him that Earth was not just a world of violence. It was also a world of beauty, A world where people wrote songs about love and painted pictures of flowers. A world where kindness existed alongside cruelty. He was reading a poem about the ocean when he heard them coming. Heavy footsteps, 5 sets, moving with purpose. Elias closed his book carefully. He set it aside on the bench. He did not turn around. Nowhere to run, Deathworlder. Krathver's voice was full of cruel pleasure. He stepped into view, his 4 arms crossed over his massive chest. The other 4 Thoraxians spread out behind him, blocking the paths between the plants. They had chosen this location carefully. It was far from the main areas. No one would hear anything. Elias looked up at them. His face was calm, but something had changed in his eyes. The softness was gone. What remained was still and cold, like the surface of deep water. "I am asking you to leave," Elias said. His voice was quiet. "Please." Krathver laughed. The other Thoraxians laughed with him. "Please," Krathver mocked. "The mighty Deathworlder says please. I thought your kind were supposed to be dangerous, but all I see is a weak little creature who cannot even defend himself." Elias stood slowly. His movements were controlled, deliberate. He faced the Thoraxians with his hands at his sides. "You do not want to do this," he said. There was no fear in his voice. There was something else, something that sounded almost like sadness. "I have done everything I can to avoid this moment. I have walked away. I have stayed quiet. I have let you push me and insult me because I did not want to hurt anyone." He paused. "But if you attack me, I will not be able to stop what happens next." Krathver bared his teeth. "Is that a threat?" "It is a warning," Elias said. "The last one you will get." For a moment doubt flickered in Krathver's eyes. There was something wrong here. The human was not afraid. He should have been terrified, facing 5 Thoraxians alone. But he stood there like he was the dangerous one, like they were the ones who should be afraid. Krathver pushed the doubt away. It was ridiculous. He was bigger, stronger, and he had numbers on his side. The human was bluffing. "Get him," Krathver ordered. The Thoraxian on the right moved first. He was fast for his size, lunging forward with his claws extended, aiming for Elias' throat. Elias was not there when the claws arrived. He moved like water flowing around the attack. His body dropped low and his legs swept out in a single smooth motion. The Thoraxian's feet left the ground. He crashed down hard, the air driven from his lungs. The others attacked together. What happened next would later be pieced together from security footage. The Academy's cameras recorded everything, though no one watched them in real time. The footage would show exactly 11 seconds of violence. It did not look like a fight. It looked like a dance, if the dance was designed to break bones. Elias did not fight the way the Thoraxians expected. He did not roar or charge or swing wild punches. He moved with terrible efficiency, every action serving a purpose. He used their size against them, redirecting their strength, turning their momentum into weapons. He struck at joints and pressure points, at the places where nerves clustered and bones were weakest. His face showed no anger, no rage, just focus, complete, absolute focus. A Thoraxian swung at him. Elias stepped inside the swing, and his elbow connected with the attacker's throat. The Thoraxian dropped, choking. Another grabbed at him from behind. Elias twisted, locked the arm, and pulled. There was a wet popping sound. The Thoraxian screamed. 2 more came at him together. Elias caught one's wrist, spun him into his companion, and struck them both as they stumbled. They went down in a heap. Krathver was the last one standing. He backed away, his eyes wide with a terror he had never felt before. This was not possible. 5 Thoraxian warriors, taken down by a single human in seconds. "What are you?" he whispered. Elias stepped toward him. There was blood on his hands now, not his blood. "I am what my world made me," he said. His voice was flat, empty. "My planet spent millions of years trying to kill my ancestors. They survived earthquakes and volcanoes. They survived ice ages and droughts. They survived predators with claws and fangs and venom. They survived everything, and they passed that survival to me. He stopped in front of Krathver. You think you are a predator. You do not know what that word means. Krathver threw a desperate punch. Elias caught his arm, twisted, and drove his knee into Krathver's elbow. The joint bent the wrong way. Krathver collapsed, screaming. Elias stood over him, breathing hard, not from exhaustion, from the effort of stopping. His body wanted to continue. His instincts screamed at him to finish the threat, to make sure the enemy could never hurt him again. He forced himself to step back. He forced his hands open. He forced the beast back into its cage. I asked you to leave, he whispered, his voice cracked. I asked you to leave. He walked to the bench and sat down heavily. His whole body was shaking. He looked at his hands, covered in blood that was not his own. Around him, the 5 Thoraxians lay where they had fallen. They were alive. He had been very careful about that. But they were broken in ways that would take months to heal. Krathver's arm would never be the same. Elias picked up his grandmother's book of poetry. A drop of blood fell on the cover. He wiped it away with shaking fingers. In the distance, alarms began to sound. Security drones emerged from hidden panels, their lights flashing. Emergency medical teams were being dispatched. Elias did not move. He sat on the bench holding his book, staring at nothing. The beast was back in its cage, but for 11 seconds it had been free. And it had done exactly what it was designed to do. Instructor Velorin was in her office when the emergency alert reached her communicator. The device buzzed with urgent messages. Security breach in the botanical gardens. Multiple injuries. Medical teams responding. Her blood ran cold when she saw the location tag. The gardens, where Elias liked to read. She ran. Her old legs had not moved this fast in decades. She pushed past startled students in the hallways. She ignored the pain in her joints. She had to get there. She had to see what had happened. Deep down, she already knew. She had filed her report weeks ago. She had warned the administration. She had told them exactly what would happen if they did not intervene. But the bureaucracy had been too slow. The forms had taken too long. The meetings had been scheduled and rescheduled. And now it was too late. She reached the botanical gardens 90 seconds after the first blow was thrown. The scene that greeted her was worse than she had imagined. 5 Thoraxians lay scattered across the ground. Medical drones hovered over them, scanning their injuries and administering emergency treatment. The injuries were precise and devastating. Broken bones, dislocated joints. One had a crushed windpipe and was struggling to breathe. Another's arm bent at an unnatural angle. And there, on a stone bench near the pond, sat Elias. He was looking at his hands. They were covered in blood. His face was blank, empty, like someone who had seen something terrible and could not process it. A small book lay on his lap. Velorin approached him slowly. She had dealt with traumatized students before. She knew that sudden movements could make things worse. Elias, she said softly. He looked up at her. His eyes were wet. Not crying, not yet, but close. What she saw in those eyes broke her ancient heart. Shame, deep, devastating shame. I did not want to, he said. His voice was barely a whisper. I tried so hard not to. Velorin sat down beside him on the bench. She folded her 4 arms in the Corvani gesture of comfort, a position that meant safety and understanding. I know, child, she said. I know. They surrounded me. His words came slowly, like each one caused him pain. They said they were going to teach me what real predators looked like. I asked them to leave. I begged them to leave, but they would not listen. I know, Velorin repeated. I have been watching. I tried to stop this before it happened. I filed reports. I warned the administration. Her voice turned bitter. They did not listen either. Elias looked at the Thoraxians being loaded onto medical stretchers. Are they going to be okay? They will live. Their injuries are serious but not life-threatening. I held back, Elias said. I could have killed them. Part of me wanted to kill them, but I held back. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I suppose I should feel proud of that, but I just feel sick. They sat in silence for a moment. The medical teams finished their work and carried the Thoraxians away. Security officers took photographs and collected evidence. The beautiful gardens had become a crime scene. They do not understand, Elias said finally. None of them understand what it is like. Tell me, Velorin said. Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to speak. On Earth, everything is trying to kill you. From the moment you are born, you are surrounded by danger. The animals have claws and fangs and venom. The plants are poisonous. The insects carry diseases. The weather can change from calm to deadly in minutes. Even the ground itself is dangerous. It shakes and splits open. It buries cities under ash and lava. He stared at his bloody hands. We evolved to survive all of it. Our bodies are weapons. Our bones are dense. Our muscles are strong. Our reflexes are fast. We can run for hours without stopping. We can survive injuries that would kill most species. And our brains are built for violence, for threat assessment, for survival. His voice cracked. Fighting is not something we choose. It is something we have to constantly choose not to do. Every moment of every day I am holding it back. The instincts, the reflexes, the part of me that sees threats everywhere and wants to eliminate them before they can hurt me. He looked at Velorin with eyes full of pain. Do you know what it is like to be at war with your own body? To feel your muscles tense for a fight every time someone makes a sudden movement? To calculate escape routes and attack angles without even meaning to? He shook his head. I came here to prove that humans could be more than monsters, but maybe the monster is all I am. Velorin reached out with one of her arms and placed it gently on his shoulder. No, she said firmly, that is not what I see when I look at you. What do you see? I see someone who carries a terrible burden with grace. I see someone who chooses kindness when cruelty would be easier. I see someone who holds back the storm inside himself because he cares about the people around him. She paused. I see strength, Elias, real strength. Not the strength to hurt, but the strength to refuse to hurt. The investigation that followed was swift. Security footage clearly showed the Thoraxians as the aggressors. They had surrounded Elias. They had blocked his escape routes. They had attacked first. Every legal standard for self-defense was met. Elias was cleared of all wrongdoing. The Thoraxians faced discipline for their harassment and assault. Krathver's diplomatic status protected him from expulsion, but he would carry the scars of that day forever. But legal clearance did not erase what had happened. The other students had seen the footage. It spread through the Academy's networks within hours. Everyone watched those 11 seconds. Everyone saw what a human could do. They had been uneasy around Elias before. Now they were terrified. He walked through the hallways and students scattered. They pressed themselves against walls. They changed direction to avoid crossing his path. Their eyes followed him with naked fear. Elias noticed. He could not help but notice. The monster had shown itself, and now everyone knew what he really was. He sat alone in his room that night, staring out the window at the stars. His grandmother's book of poetry sat on his desk, the blood cleaned off its cover. He had tried to read it, but the words would not focus. He thought about leaving, dropping out of the academy, going home to Earth, where everyone understood what it meant to be human, where he would not have to explain or apologize or hide. But that felt like giving up. That felt like proving everyone right. He was not just a monster. He refused to be just a monster. He just needed someone else to see that. 1 week after the incident in the botanical gardens, Instructor Velorin requested a special assembly. The Academy's administration granted her request without hesitation. They were nervous about the situation. Fear was spreading through the student body. Something needed to be done. The great assembly hall filled with students from every species represented at the academy. They sat in curved rows that rose toward the ceiling, a rainbow of colors and shapes and sizes. Whispers filled the air. Everyone knew what this was about. Velorin stood at the podium on the stage. Beside her, looking like he wanted to disappear, stood Elias. The whispers stopped when Velorin raised her arms for silence. "Thank you all for coming," she said. Her voice carried through the hall, amplified by the speakers built into the walls. "I know you are all aware of what happened last week. I know many of you have seen the footage, and I know that many of you are afraid." She paused, letting her words settle over the audience. "Good," she said. "You should be afraid." Surprised murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was not what they expected. "You should be afraid," Velorin continued. "Not because Elias Chen is dangerous, though he is. You should be afraid because your fear might teach you something important." She gestured to Elias. He stood with his eyes downcast, his shoulders tight. "Look at this human," Velorin said. "Really look at him. He has spent every single day at this academy restraining himself. Every loud noise triggers instincts that are older than most of your species. Every sudden movement makes his body prepare for combat. Every moment of stress pushes him toward violence." Her voice rose. "And every single time he chooses not to act on those instincts. Do you understand what that requires? The constant, exhausting effort of remaining gentle in a universe that made him for war." The hall was silent now. Every eye was fixed on the stage. "I have lived for 300 years, Velorin said. "I have taught students from hundreds of worlds. I have seen the best and worst that the galaxy has to offer. And I tell you now, what this human does every day is one of the most difficult things I have ever witnessed." She turned to look at the section where the Thoraxians sat. The 4 who could still walk were there, their injuries wrapped in healing bandages. Krathver sat among them, his arm in a regeneration brace. "The Thoraxians called themselves predators," Velorin said. Her voice turned cold. "They sought out what they saw as weakness and attacked. They cornered a young man in an isolated location. They blocked his escape routes. They threatened him with violence. That is not predation. That is cruelty. That is cowardice." Krathver looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "And this human," Velorin continued, turning back to Elias, "this Deathworlder you fear so much, gave them every opportunity to walk away. He asked them to leave. He warned them what would happen. He did everything in his power to avoid violence." Her voice softened. "But they chose not to listen. They chose to attack, and they discovered what violence truly means when it comes from a species that was forged by a world that tried to kill them every single day." She walked to the edge of the stage and looked out at the sea of faces. "Humans are not monsters," she said. "They are survivors of a monster's world who have chosen, against every instinct, to be kind. The strength required to make that choice, every single day, is greater than any of you can imagine. It is greater than any Thoraxian warrior has ever possessed." The silence in the hall was absolute. "I want you to think about that," Velorin said. "The next time you see Elias in the hallway, the next time you feel afraid of him, I want you to remember, he is fighting a battle every moment of his life, a battle against his own nature, a battle to be better than his instincts, and he is winning that battle." She paused. "Can any of you say the same?" She stepped back from the edge of the stage. "This assembly is concluded." In the weeks that followed, something changed at the academy. It did not happen all at once. Fear does not disappear overnight. But slowly, carefully, students began to approach Elias. They came with questions at first. Questions about Earth. Questions about humans. Questions about how he controlled the violence inside him. Elias answered them all. He told them about his homeworld, about the beauty that existed alongside the danger. He told them about human art and music and poetry. He told them about his grandmother, who had survived 3 natural disasters and still smiled every day. He told them that being human was not just about being dangerous. It was about choosing what to do with that danger. Some students asked if he could teach them. They wanted to learn the self-control he had mastered. They wanted to understand how to face fear without letting it control them. Elias found himself surrounded by people who did not see him as a monster. They saw him as a teacher. Instructor Velorin watched from a distance, a smile on her ancient face. This was what she had hoped for, not just acceptance but understanding, not just tolerance but connection. One evening she found Elias in the botanical gardens. He was sitting on the same bench where everything had happened, reading his grandmother's book of poetry. But this time he was not alone. A small group of students sat around him, listening as he read aloud. The poem was about the ocean, about its power and its beauty, about how something so dangerous could also be so peaceful. Velorin did not interrupt. She simply watched as the human who had been so alone found his place among the stars. Later, after the other students had left, Elias noticed her standing in the shadows. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for what you said at the assembly, for believing in me." Velorin walked over and sat beside him. "I only spoke the truth." "The truth does not always matter," Elias said. "Sometimes fear is stronger." "Sometimes," Velorin agreed, "but not always, not forever." She looked at him with her golden eyes. "You changed something here, Elias. You showed them that strength and kindness can exist in the same heart. That is a lesson this galaxy badly needs." Elias looked down at his hands. They were clean now. They had been clean for weeks, but sometimes he still saw the blood. "I am still afraid of myself," he admitted. "I still feel the beast inside me. I do not think that will ever go away." "No," Velorin said. "It probably will not, but that is not the point." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "The point is that you keep fighting. The point is that you keep choosing kindness. The point is that every day you decide to be more than what your instincts demand." She stood and looked out at the gardens, at the alien plants that grew in peaceful harmony. "On my world," she said, "we have a very old saying. The strongest warrior is not the one who defeats all enemies. The strongest warrior is the one who defeats the enemy within." She turned back to Elias. "You are the strongest warrior I have ever met." Elias sat alone after she left. He watched the artificial insects flutter among the flowers. He listened to the soft sound of water in the pond. He felt the weight of his grandmother's book in his hands. The beast was still there inside him. It would always be there. But so was something else. Something that made him more than a weapon, more than a survivor. Something that made him human. He opened his book and began to read. The strength to be kind. It was the only strength that had ever mattered.